Do you know what legacy means?
It's what you pass down to your children and your children's children. It's what remains of you when you're gone.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the Legacy of Westeros. I'm Zach, and I'm getting dizzy from all of the face shuffling that's going on the screen here, but we're excited to be bringing you more Westerosi content nonetheless. And what's really cool about this channel is we get to cover all things past, present, future, series, books, even the potential for movies. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about on this particular episode. Shawn, the news broke from Variety not too long ago about the potential of something from Game of Thrones hitting the big screen. How do you feel about that?
So I didn't even know the article I was reading was going towards that, because that's not the headline.
Right, and it should be.
Yeah, it should be, which is why it's the headline on our thumbnail. So I was stunned, and then you get thinking about it. It's like, oh, right, the biggest dragon ever in Westeros, conquering Westeros. Yeah, that's probably something that's going to look pretty damn good on the big screen.
For those of you that may not know what we're alluding to, the news broke about a story surrounding Aegon the First, Aegon the Conqueror, and he and his brides, Rhaenys and Visenya, conquering Westeros as they make their way over from Old Valyria. It is a very strong tale that is deeply embedded in Game of Thrones lore and Westerosi history. We hear Arya talk about it as if it was a great history lesson when she is under the care of Tywin Lannister. The two of them almost reminisce about this tale. And then you actually have Vhagar in the House of the Dragon series. And Vhagar is one of the three dragons that helps with the conquer of Westeros, in addition to Balerion the Black Dread, as you mentioned, Shawn. So there's a lot of potential for this to really make a splash on the big screen. We've always appreciated the graphics and the visual components, the dragons being one of the biggest things that makes Game of Thrones so popular. So for it to possibly be a movie is really, really cool. What I'm concerned about, and this is something that I didn't think about until just now, there's plenty of original movies out there that don't make it to the big screen. A lot of Netflix films just get released to Netflix. A lot of Paramount originals just go to Paramount. A lot of Hulu originals, etc. Is this the potential for something where they do like a feature-length film that releases exclusively on HBO or HBO Max? And if it is well received, then they go ahead with the rest of the show. Is that the impression that you got from reading this Variety article, or does it sound like something that's going to be distributed to the masses?
So I would assume it's distributed to the masses, considering the Warner Brothers Discovery merger and the things they're trying to focus on. The thing that this article doesn't tell you is if you're going to do an Aegon the Conqueror movie and then follow it up with a show, you kind of can't show him conquering Westeros in the movie, which to me makes the movie, like, the movie could only be one thing. And I would assume it's the destruction of Old Valyria. And that would be insane to see on the big screen. Like all those dragons, that'd be something.
So I'm looking at the Wiki of Ice and Fire just to make sure that I don't get my facts incorrectly. But the destruction of Old Valyria is a part of their story, obviously. However, there is also the creation of Aegon Fort that happens near Blackwater Bay. I think it eventually becomes King's Landing, if I remember my history correctly. So it's entirely possible that what you see in the beginning of the film is a thriving Valyria. Then you see its destruction. You see Aegon evacuating and making his way to Westeros, settling on Dragonstone, and then a big battle at the end of the movie, culminating in their own version of the Battle of Blackwater and the creation of Aegon Fort. Then you pick up with the rest of the series where he is going after the rest of the kingdoms. He has made his imprint in Westeros. He has established a presence. He has built a fortress. And then the series picks up with him going after the rest of the kingdoms following the Battle of the Blackwater and the creation of Aegon Fort.
I think that'd be amazing. I think if you're going to do that, though, you better be committing to a Lord of the Rings length movie and
Yeah.
realize that you'll probably
Two,
lose a little bit on that in the box office because of how long it is. But my
2.5 hours, 2:45. I don't think they would go over 3. There's very few movies that people are willing to sit 3 for. And I mean, not even Star Wars was that bold. I think the only one that's been bold enough to do that lately is James Cameron. So I could see it being 2:30 to 2:45 for sure.
give me the 3 hour the Batman cut or the 3 hour Avengers, is it Endgame or Infinity War? I think you like if you're going to show all that in one movie, you almost need it because you
Yeah.
need to introduce the general public to not just um, the Targaryens, but the dragons as well, so that when the destruction is happening, you feel something. I would
Right.
argue probably more material there to do more than one movie before you get to a series.
You really could. Like you said at the top, the destruction of Old Valyria could be its own movie in its own sense. But if we're trying to like create something that's a backdoor pilot for a series, and it's supposed to be about the conquering of Westeros, I really feel like the movie needs to end with a battle that takes place on Westerosi soil in order to give people a hunger for more. That was really the only thing I was thinking of. You have to make them want more. And being as big of Game of Thrones fans as we are, we're really excited that this potential for more is going to tell a really, really cool story. The Variety article does, of course, give away the spoiler that they only conquer 6 of the kingdoms with the exception of Dorne. I think that would be something really cool to see in the series, but that's definitely not something that they'll be able to include in the movie. So it is going to be interesting to see just how much gets included in the movie and how much they'll have to leave out. But to establish the first Targaryen dynasty and to take down the Vale, to march on the Martells, to take over Old Town and have the High Towers surrender to you, like that ties directly into Otto Hightower being the Hand of the King in the House of the Dragon series. So you get to see how the High Towers became subservient to the Targaryens in a film slash series like this. It definitely has a lot of potential.
Yeah, there's so much rich lore that they have to take from that. I just hope they're not biting off more than they can chew. You know, you have House of the Dragon season 2 and 3 apparently coming. You know, the Jon Snow show. You have this, and there's belief that there's probably another show out there they're working on too. So it's a lot, but you know, I would say the franchise to this date has never let us down.
So far, they have not. I know that there have been some mixed reviews about House of the Dragon, even among friends of ours. And so it's really okay if it does have mixed reviews. Not everything is going to appeal to everybody. Not everybody's going to enjoy a slow burn the way you have with House of the Dragon versus the big payoffs that you get in the final 2 seasons of the original Game of Thrones show. Maybe not everybody is invested in the Targaryens as they might be in Jon Snow. And so I think it's great that there's going to be that much content out there. But I did want to touch on one thing that is maybe a concern. I don't know. One of the previous discussions that we had on the Phantom Empire show, House of the Empire, was that this type of plot was actually supposed to be the back end of the House of the Dragon series. We were going to get 3 or 4 seasons of the Dance of Dragons, and then we were actually going to take a step back and maybe even take a step forward leading up to like Robert's Rebellion. There was going to be some components of both of those on either end of the Dance of Dragons. And now this Variety report coming out is basically saying that the conquest of Westeros, Aegon the First's story, is going to be its own tale. It doesn't have a writer currently attached to it, but it's setting itself up to be its own tale, its own story, its own series, which is, yes, furthering the number of shows and series that we get, but Do you feel like that's gonna have an effect on what we get from House of the Dragon? It sounds like instead of the possible 7 seasons we discussed previously, it's looking more like maybe in the ballpark of 4 instead.
Yeah, I think it was always going to be around 4 for the cast of characters that we know now. Um, but I don't know if anything's changed other than like I totally believe they want to do Robert's Rebellion because we're attached to those characters and we get to see the younger versions of them.
Mhm.
Um, and I still think that'll happen. I think there's interest in that story, even though we've heard a lot of what happens. It's no different than when a movie franchise does a prequel. Um, but I don't know if it's really changed other than maybe they're trying to make it less confusing and call it its own thing.
Well, and it could also alter the timeline a bit as far as when things get released, because you could be working on season 4 of House of the Dragon and don't have to wait for season 4 to be done in order to start production on their season 5, which would be Aegon's story. Those two can now overlap. They can now coincide. You can have the release of season 4 while season 1 of the Aegon show is currently in production or something like that. So I think it gives them a little bit more freedom to tell the stories that they want to tell in the time that they want to tell it.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I mean, you also have that Jon Snow show, which a lot of people want to know what's going to happen with that. Seems like it's going to go down. But it's already what April 2023. So like you're not seeing that Jon Snow show before winter 2025. These things take time. They're they can't rush them. As much as Game of Thrones season 7 or 8 might feel like it's rushed, that's more rushed storytelling. The productions were not rushed. The productions were even longer.
Right.
These are
Right.
these are monstrosities to conceive and so many moving pieces. And then the idea that you're not going to be able to use the same crew on all these different projects means you're going to have to be damn careful about who you hire and who you're bringing on because you don't want, I'm sorry, I'm going to point my finger over to Star Wars for a second. You don't want Andor looking like Andor and then Kenobi looking like Kenobi. There's a massive production quality difference, regardless of how you feel about the story. I don't ever want to see cheap Game of Thrones, if you will.
No, and that's something that we have talked about on the air and off the air is that we would definitely prefer to have quality rather than quantity. Quantity is great, but not at the expense of something with as rich a lore and history and potential as Westeros has. So I'm definitely on board with you there. I do find that middle paragraph interesting. I know we've kept this article up and people have kind of been reading the same 6 or 7 sentences. The plans remain in flux at present, says the middle paragraph there. So I think it's worth noting that even though this comes from a very credible source like Variety, there's always the chance that things could change. And since HBO has declined to comment, there's no certainty that this is what's going to happen. But I, for one, am very excited at the prospect because this idea of being able to see Vagar and Balerion the Black Dread and a pyrotechnics display unlike anything we've ever seen on a IMAX screen or a Dolby screen is just that sends chills down my spine just trying to imagine it.
Just going to see a Game of Thrones movie in cinemas would be spectacular, man. Like, I get goosebumps when I go to see a movie that I've just waited a long time for. The Batman, Revenge of the Sith, The Force Awakens, some of the Avenger movies, The Dark Knight.
Mhm.
But if we're gonna have like a 3-year buildup, 4-year buildup, maybe even to a Game of Thrones movie, man, it's gonna be hard to not be so invested in that. And then you hope that they don't, drop the payoff. But again, like we said in our last video, they haven't done that yet.
And we're hoping that they never do. It's interesting that they noted the Long Night project that was abandoned and ultimately scrapped. It's a fair point that that is the only other content that's been recorded, and it was so shoddy that they decided not to even publish it. Like somewhere in the depths of the Warner Brothers HBO archives, you've got it lingering around somewhere. And the fanboy in me would love to see it just so that I could critique it as much as the executives did. But I think that is not a warning label. It's a testament that HBO would rather get it right than put something out there that people might be iffy about. So yeah, that may be the only other content that's been recorded outside of House of the Dragon lately. But I don't see that as a red flag. I think things will still be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the last person that should ever preach patience to anybody because I don't have a patient mode in me. That being said, um, there's a movie franchise that has been making headlines the last couple of weeks where they apparently have to have a movie out by 2025, says Bob Iger. And like, I would hate to ever see anything Westeros related working under pressure like that. If you have to delay something, if you have to back something up,
Right.
do that to protect the quality of the franchise. Keep it special. And regardless of where you stand with House of the Dragon, I still think that when you view it, it's a very special thing.
Well, I think it's especially special for you and I because of the ties that we have to this franchise. And so I'm equally hopeful and optimistic, but also just going to be as level-headed as I am feasibly able to, because like the article says, there's plenty that's still in flux, but the potential is certainly there. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Follow us on social media and let us know what you think of the possibility of a Game of Thrones movie and Aegon the First getting his own series. We would love to interact with the fans and keep up with all of y'all. And my inner Texan just kind of showed out there by going with all y'all as the phrase. But we would love for you to follow us on social media. You've got the handles right there in front of you. And Shawn, we've got plenty of really great stuff coming out here on this channel. I'm really looking forward to what lies ahead for us here at the Legacy of Westeros.
Absolutely. We're going to be putting out videos as often as we can. Most of the time, it'll just be Zach and I, but now and then we'll have a buddy on, or if there's some news that one of us can get to and the other one's not around, we'll do our best to do that. And I know we want to do some like podcast style episodes too. But at the moment, there's a podcast with no name. So we'll have to talk about that and get to it. Also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, slash that damn bell, do all that YouTube stuff that they require you to do to find us on here. And it'd be appreciated.
Absolutely. There's plenty more of discussions. There's plenty more of content left to be discovered and discussed. But that is going to do it for this episode. We thank you for tuning in and being a part of the channel. Looking forward to seeing you next time right here on the Legacy of Westeros.
Do you know what legacy means?
It's what you pass down to your children and your children's children. It's what remains of you when you're gone.